Thank you very much, and I will do my best to keep it light for the last session of the day. I'm really happy to be here, really keen to be part of the conference today. There we go. So when Toby and I spoke about this, a couple of things that he asked me to share today, talking about what's the current state of financial advice, what does the landscape look like, what are the challenges for advisors, and we also talked about the current review that ASIC are running into managed accounts, so I'll spend some time on that. And depending where we're at with time at the end of that, I may get to touch on some advocacy points, talking to what's top of mind for advisors right now. But if the shepherd's crook comes out, I will refrain. So we'll see how we do for time. Look, the first thing I wanted to touch on, as I mentioned, is the current state of financial advice. And the thing that we focus on a lot right now is numbers. And you can probably see from that chart why numbers are really important for us. Many in the room will be aware that the final legislative deadline for advisors to exit the profession was 31st of December 2025. So you can see that numbers have come down a lot, and there's a bit of a jag down at the end of that chart, and that's because of that legislative deadline. That was the last one. So the hope is that we will recover from here, but you can probably see we've got a lot of recovering to do. That is really bad news for the profession. It is fantastic news for current financial advisors. I don't talk to many members who have any trouble getting new business right now. Many of them are overwhelmed with requests, and many have shut their books as well. So it's actually a really great time to be an individual financial advisor. I've put a couple of other stats up there. There was an all-time high of almost 29,000 advisors in 2019. I'm never sure whether to put it on the chart. It's one of those outlier points. The rest of the numbers are at end of June. And we know that that nearly 29,000 number was pumped because a lot of people came onto the register before a legislative deadline so they could count as current advisors. So I'm not sure how real that number was. The other thing that's interesting is the average age of a financial advisor. It's been in the 50s for as long as I can remember. It's currently 52. And of course, the percent female, we are doing better than we were 10 years ago, but that essentially hasn't moved since COVID. So we're not particularly diverse as a profession. So certainly room to do more, and regrowing the profession is one of our really key strategic priorities as the professional association at FAAA. Well, so much for numbers. The other thing that I find really interesting is the business models and how they've changed. That numbers chart I showed you was over the last 10 years. This is a similar chart, and it looks at how the licensing models have changed over the last decade for financial advice. And you can probably see just visually the blue's getting bigger. So all of those shades of blue, you might not be able to read the legend, they're all privately owned licenses. So the vast majority of advisors now work in privately owned licensees. The red is the banks. So you can see they're almost completely out. The kind of maroony one at the far left, that's diversified models. So those are businesses that have product as well as advice and other revenue streams and so on. The green one is interesting. Dark green is the industry super funds effectively. And I find it interesting that it hasn't really moved a lot, certainly since COVID. We do have a number of members who work in those profit to member funds. But yeah, it's actually not changing, I think, as much as many expect. Although we are starting to hear this year that they're hurrying up again. So it's just interesting that this radical change in the way our profession is structured has gone from a profession that was highly dominated by large institutions to one that's become essentially a profession of micro practices and privately owned licensees. The last view I wanted to give you was the advice practices themselves, and these are harder to get data on. Number of advisors comes from the Financial Advisor Register. Licensing again comes from ASIC, so we can be pretty confident on those numbers. But data on the practices themselves comes from various sources who survey the corporate authorised reps, the practices that are licensed by those larger organisations. This data comes from a survey that was done by Advisor Ratings August last year, so it's pretty current. Those set of bars on the far left, that's the average price of a piece of advice. And notoriously, as you can see, it's going up really, really fast. Two key reasons for that. One is the demand supply imbalance that we saw on the first slide. The other is the dramatically increasing cost to provide advice. So both of those are feeding in to an average ticket price of just under $4,700 per piece of advice. And that's up 18% just on a year. So yeah, it's heading in the wrong direction if you take the perspective of consumers who are looking for and need advice and are struggling to access it. The horizontal bars, that's the average FAAA per advisor, so funds under advice, if you like. Really steadily growing pretty remarkably, and we're sitting at just under 100 million FAAA per advisor right now. Lastly, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at practices that are using managed accounts. There's a whole lot of different surveys out there. The one I've landed on 58 to 62% because that's the range that most of the surveys I've seen. All of the surveys I've seen are saying that more practices are looking to start using managed accounts in the future. And one that I found quite surprising was that 50% of all new FUM that advisors are advising on is going into managed accounts. So this sector is clearly incredibly important in financial advice, and it's going to continue to be. Just over 6,000 advice businesses. So we're not just a small business segment, but a micro business segment. And that's one of the challenges that we face in building things like large technology stacks or trying to achieve efficiencies and so on. There's a lot of little businesses in advice. Anyway, so I thought that'd be a bit of a quick gallop through the advice sector. If anyone has a question, by the way, just throw your hand up as we're going through. I'm happy to chat afterwards. There is a good deal of info about our sector, so if anyone has some questions, happy to do that. In terms of the challenges, they're really consistent. So this is data that we get from our members when we ask them, what's bugging you? What's on your mind right now? But when you look at various independent surveys, these issues are very, very consistent. And the top point is red tape. Talking to an advisor, the first thing that will really get up their nose is the amount of time they spend on useless paperwork that doesn't help consumers instead of sitting in front of their clients. They get really, really annoyed by it. It's our number one advocacy point with government. It's been a big focus through the Delivering Better Financial Outcomes reforms as well, that this is useless regulation that is not helping consumers, that is expensive to produce. During those QAR reforms, I remember being on an ABC show, they brought the cameras in and I showed them a typical client file that one of our members gave us. It was just the paperwork for a year. It was like, yay, hi. And the journo couldn't believe it. They were like, no, that can't be right. Come on, you're just making it up. No, have a look. That's what it looks like. Something like 100 pages of that might be the SOA, but there's plenty more when you're engaging with a retail client. So that's the number one issue, the number one thing we focus on. Next one is input costs. So I mentioned this is the other key reason why the price of advice is high. I'll put them into two categories. One of them is the unique costs that advisors face because of the sector we're in. There's a lot of tension right now on the CSLR levy. Advisors will be paying close to $4,000 each this year for the CSLR. Then you add the ASIC levy to that. You can add PI premiums. You can add a whole lot more stuff that's just about being an advisor. And then, of course, there's the other costs that everyone in business faces, the cost of staff, cost of power, inflation, premises, and so on. So I liken it now when I'm engaging with politicians to it's about being an obstetrician. The costs and the inputs are actually quite similar. So you've got to make close to $100,000 a year as an advisor now if you're in a business before you start making money. So it's expensive. Staff comes up a lot. I actually got bailed up on the way over by a financial advice recruiter who's talking about the problems in this market, that it's hard to get good staff. This is patchy, of course, because not all practices are hiring, and those who aren't hiring don't see this. A number are offshoring. This is becoming a really big trend in advice. There's lots of roles going to the Philippines, India, Sri Lanka, Vietnam primarily. But yes, the costs of engaging staff is a big problem when you're trying to hire an advisor, as well as firms who are looking to grow are starting to do. Because of that crunch in numbers, the cost of hiring an advisor is going up a lot. Technology comes up every time, and there's a couple of aspects to that. One is just how do I build my tech stack, particularly given that I'm often a small business, don't necessarily have a lot of help. Sometimes my licensee will support me. I might be on my own, I might be self-licensed. So that exercises the minds of a lot of advisors. And in particular in technology, cybersecurity and AI are really specific aspects of technology that advisors are thinking a lot about, they're worried about. There's a current court case that some people in the room may be aware of where ASIC is suing the licensee over cybersecurity and essentially arguing that they should have done more with their license practices when they experienced a breach. So it's an ongoing concern. I heard some previous speakers talking about AI as well, and there's certainly a strong view that this is more of an opportunity than a threat in advice. Most advisors, I'm going to say, feel pretty confident and secure in the importance of their personal relationships with their clients. They don't see AI as replacing them anytime soon. They see AI as an opportunity to become more effective, more efficient, get some of those input costs down. That may change because these engines are moving really, really fast, but that's, I'd say, is probably the mood of most advisors right now. The other point that is really important to our members is talking for the profession and defending the profession. This is something that pretty much every member asks me about and tells me that they want us to be focused on for them. Advisors have paid a really high price to be professionals over the last 7 years. They've earned that title and they want it defended. So I get reams of emails and calls from members if a newspaper, for example, identifies a fraudster incorrectly as a financial advisor. We write letters to media demanding they retract and so on. This has also been a big focus for us during the Shield and First Guardian collapse. The commentary around that, we've done lots and lots of media and lots of outreach and engagement on that particular collapse. But we are the newest profession, we're still new, and our members are really looking for support and recognition as professionals. I will say that the email address is there for anyone in the room who's a member. We love to hear from you. So we get emails every day from members talking about positions that we've taken or not taken, things that our members think are missing. They're becoming very engaged and active. So I always say it when I'm speaking to groups like this. If something's on your mind, you don't see it there, you don't see your association advocating for it, let us know, because we're here to help you, we're here to be your voice. It's important that we say the right things. Toby, the other thing we spoke about was the ASIC, the current ASIC inquiry into managed accounts, and I'm happy to share what we're aware of. Obviously, not all of this is official from ASIC. We do catch up with ASIC pretty regularly. But a lot of this is actually from people who are currently involved in this review process. So there was a review, many would be aware, back in, I think it was kicked off in 2019, maybe a little earlier, specifically into MDAs though, and that thing died during COVID. We know a report was produced and some of it was leaked to Professional Planner, but officially that report got discontinued. This new discovery process that ASIC is going through is broadly across managed accounts. Of course, SMAs are the largest sector, and so far as we're aware, they're focusing mostly on SMAs right now. They are looking both at the advice, if you like, so the licensees and the advisors that they work with, and the providers. Certainly, we're hearing more about the licensee inquiries, but that's not to say that ASIC isn't equally talking to the providers. It may be that we're just not getting as much feedback directly from them. One thing I think is interesting, important, is whether this is what's called a risk-rated review. Sorry, I don't want to creep too much. So ASIC has on occasion done reviews into sectors that are what they call risk-weighted. And that means that they've gone out and looked for places where they know there are problems. That becomes a problem if the report is presented as a report into the sector or on the current state of the sector. The most recent one was self-managed super funds. So it was a risk-weighted exercise. It was in the report, but a lot of media didn't pick up on it. And it was reported as a report into the super sector. We don't know whether this is that, but it will be important for us to know when the report comes out whether this was targeted to areas ASIC believes are high risk or whether it's an impartial inquiry across the whole sector. We don't know yet. So what are they focusing on? The top 2 points are the main ones. So what are we hearing? We're hearing they're looking at specifically incentives, inappropriate payments, sales or revenue targets, incentives that may be banned or may be inappropriate in this space and seeing if they're still in existence. Management of conflicts is another big one, and they just re-released their RG, was it 181? Yep. I get a bit lost in all the numbers. Yes, so that was recently released. This is clearly something that's very much on the mind of the regulator in terms of what they're looking at. They are looking at governance frameworks, by which I mean, you know, are the organisations independent or not, and so on. They're looking at the conduct obligations, particularly for advisors. They are looking at consumer outcomes and whether it's a fact that consumers are doing better if they're in these models or not. And they're looking at transparency, particularly around holdings and fees. From what we've heard so far, the questions they're asking are very broad. I don't know if there's anyone in this room who's had a request, but you might get something like, give us
one person in this room who has had it and has dealt with it probably won't put his hand up.
Okay,
what do you mean?
Fair enough. Fair enough. But yes, you'll get a kind of boil the ocean request, and it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of documentation involved generally. The latest we've heard from ASIC is that it's well underway, and that we can expect to hear more this year, by which I think they mean calendar year rather than financial year. But there's no commitments to any dates or specific targets at this stage. Two key things that I thought I would reflect on in this audience, given some of the questions that we know about and some of the issues that have come up, also some things we have seen from time to time. So the first one is proof that the advisor has satisfied their best interest duty. And there's a lot of looking at that. So I've put there, ensure that the advisor has considered individual client needs. So have they just recommended the same model portfolio to every client? Or are they saying, well, this client needs individually held positions so they can manage their tax appropriately. This client needs income. This client's more after accumulation. So not talking highly sophisticated, but they will be looking for this. They'll be looking to ensure that the advisor has taken the client's individual needs and objectives into account when they've recommended a portfolio or managed an account of any kind. Sort of related to that is cookie cutter advice. This has come up a lot in the Shield and First Guardian matters. If you've read any of the lead decisions from AFCA, this is a frequent criticism. Every client got the same outcome no matter what their inputs were. I have seen some SOAs that are, in my view, put words into the client's mouth. So the client's objective might have been expressed as, my objective is to roll my current holdings into the XYZ portfolio. Okay, it's not an objective, that's a strategy. But we've seen examples where every SOA from a particular advisor had exactly the same wording for the client objective. So I'd certainly hope that's not an issue for anyone in this room, but we do see it surprisingly often, and it's something, certainly in cases of misbehaviour, it's definitely something to be aware of, is to make sure that the link has been very explicitly made between that client and the portfolio that's been recommended. It's also important from the advisor's perspective that they do their due diligence on the portfolio and that they monitor it. So you can't just rely on a research rating. You can't just rely on the fact that it's on the APL. You actually have an individual obligation as an advisor to satisfy yourself that this is okay and it continues to be okay. And of course, you can't take any conflicted remuneration. I get frustrated by this because this has been illegal for a long time, at least since July 2013. But we still see comments made in the media and so on about inappropriate commissions and sales incentives and so on. If they exist, they're really clearly illegal. So I would be surprised if we saw too much of that in this review, but it's certainly something we know ASIC are looking at. With the other kind of things that they might see as red flags, no independent oversight of the portfolio, lots of related party products, lots of layering of fees, and also a lack of transparency on either the holdings or the fees, or in some cases both. These are the sorts of things that they're looking for. Also, if a portfolio has underperformed for a period and there's no evidence that action has been taken about that, that questions have been asked and so on. So look, I will plug, by the way, there's a CPD article in Advisor Voice that we accredit. So I thought I'd give them a plug about managed accounts in the ASIC Spotlight. So if you want to dive into it a bit more, go have a look at that article and you get some CPD points. But look, that's pretty much where we're at in terms of this review. We are keeping a close eye on it. We know it's really important for the sector. And if you have any intelligence or information that you think would help us, let us know. We're always keen to find out what we can and to do what we can to assist our members who might get
our engagement with ASIC on both this review that Sarah's talking about and also the MDA refresh, which is completely independent, is that, yes, that this one is about SMAs. And the conversations with them were, well, we might get to apply some of these things we're thinking about into the MDA space more generally, but but that's not what we're paying attention to right now. It's platforms, SMAs, and as you said, licensees and these other things.
Yeah, and look, ASIC have said publicly, the success of the sector has not gone unnoticed. They've seen how strongly these products and these solutions have been adopted by advisors. They've seen, what are we at? It must be 260 billion or something of that order.
As we're about to release the December number in a week or two. Yeah.
Right, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
just one
yes.
point. You touched on consumer outcomes because that's one of the 3 dot points in their corporate plan. What they don't have, and nobody has, and we've been trying to build, is a comparison of the managed account outcome in terms of investment outcomes compared to the alternatives, which are primarily sort of individual advice created, and monitored by the individual advisor. And ASIC kind of acknowledged that, they don't have a counterfactual. So they've tended to look at, therefore, at, there are benefits to these things. Are those benefits being shared? Not are they delivering what clients were looking to achieve?
Yes, it's a difficult one, just in advice more broadly, I think, because there's a plethora of these vehicles. I know there's various attempts being made at the moment to research managed accounts. There's an initiative that Advisor Ratings are working on around standardising reporting of fees and so on. So I think that those things are gaining pace and will become more important over time. But we're in the early stages with this review, so be interested and certainly very engaged with how this pans out. I might just quickly touch on some of the things that are really top of mind for our advisors just in the last couple of minutes. And the one that's just come out this week that we're very pleased about is the education reforms. So this is an area where we, along with SIA, the accounting groups, CFA societies, a whole lot of us have come together to advocate for the degree that you're required to do to become an advisor. Those requirements be made more flexible. The moment you have to do one of a specific set of degrees, you have to complete every course in that degree with the exact same name and the exact same number. So it's incredibly inflexible. If you've started out in accounting or commerce or something, come across advice and thought, actually, this is really cool, I like this, say goodbye to the first year's HECS and you've got to start again. So what the Minister is essentially saying is he's agreeing with this proposal and he's suggesting that instead of 11 core knowledge areas for financial planning, that will come back to 4, and that other study that you've completed at a tertiary level can be taken into account. So, you might have started a commerce degree, you might have started economics, actuarial studies, whatever. Where it's relevant to financial advice, it can be taken into account. And I do want to emphasise relevant because I've seen some surprising comments in trade media the last couple of days, people suggesting that a Bachelor of Zoology could qualify you. That's not the case. It does have to be relevant and it does have to be at tertiary level. But we think this would open up dramatically the number of people that are available and interested in studying financial planning. We're really hopeful that this will help us regrow the profession. So we're really, really pleased about this one. We've got a month to get our submissions in. So if you or your organisation are interested, please take a look. It's on the Treasury website. But for me, this is some of the best news I've had in a while, actually. The best meeting I've had with the Minister in a long time. CSLR is probably the number one thing that our members raise with us, the compensation scheme of last resort, very well-intentioned scheme, that we support in principle, where the costs have blown out to an extent that it's completely unsustainable now. The Minister is aware of that and agrees with us. And we're now at the point of working out how we're going to fix it. So the initial, I've put a couple of recent notes up there. I mentioned that early in December, the special levy, so the amount above the 20 million sector cap that was attributed to financial advice, 47.3 million, got spread broadly by the Minister across all the AFCA subsectors. We got 22% of that, 10.4 million. So advisors are paying over 30 million for this scheme. And as I've showed you before, we're a small business sector. Affordability is a huge issue for us. Those kind of numbers really attack the profitability of a small business. Advisors will get another bill in April, around about 2,000 per advisor. We don't know the exact number yet. We've had an inquiry into professional indemnity insurance that recently closed, and there's also been a recent inquiry into managed investment schemes, second one in the last 2 years. So I'll be interested to see if anything comes out of that. We know there's going to be a big consultation paper by the end of this month, so lots of interest in that one. Let us move on very quickly. So maybe the last one I'll touch on today, Toby, is the AML CTF reforms. So hopefully many of you are aware of these. The big change affects real estate agents, accountants and lawyers, and gold bullion dealers and precious metal dealers who were hitherto outside the regime. They will be in it from 1 July of this year. And they are people who provide what's called tranche 2 services, so essentially investing money on behalf of people setting up corporate structures and so on. Our sector has what's called an item 54 exemption because we're arranging for, we're not actually doing, and our goal has been to keep that. But in the context of managed accounts, there are some complications. We are pretty sure that if you're an operator of a managed account, you will be caught by the tranche 2 services. You can see there, it's not the end of the world, but you have to do some more reporting. You have a heavier compliance obligation if you're offering tranche 2 services than if you're just an advice business. The thing that's outstanding is if you are an advisor who uses managed accounts, are you caught by the wording there, item 3, receiving, holding, controlling, or managing property to facilitate transactions? We have not yet got a straight answer out of AUSTRAC or the Department of Home Affairs on that. We've asked for an extension. We're at very senior levels now saying we have to be really explicit with people because if you are caught by that, you need to register by the end of this month. So there's a lot happening. I've probably given you a little bit of a flavour of that. Certainly advocacy and some of the issues that I've touched on this afternoon are very much top of mind for advisors. I will say if you're an advisor right now, it's actually a bit of a sweet spot. The demand for our services massively outweighs supply. And while we have some issues that we need to manage, that's a great place to be. I could put a 0 on the end of the number of financial advisors in this country, and we wouldn't even touch the sides of demand. So I'm really optimistic about the future for financial advice. I think there's a lot to keep an eye on, but there's a lot to be happy about for this profession as well. I'm really proud to be a part of it and to be representing financial advisors. But I will close there and thank you very much for inviting me to join you today. Thank you.